Putumayo, southern Colombia. It is August 2007. On a road through the jungle, soldiers stop a truck and open the back part. Inside they find cash, lots of it. 7,370 million pesos, somewhere around $3.5 million at the time. Bundled, packed, and wrong. The bills are humid. Some are traced with soil, as if they had spent time underground, as if someone had dug them up. There is a very ordinary, yet weird explanation on offer. It is a chain of shops, they will say. A company that pays its customers to shop. The paperwork is in order. The returns are real. And for another full year, almost everyone believes it. They should not have, because that truck is the first crack in something enormous. A year later, this company will freeze. The government will seize it. And hundreds of thousands of people will discover all at once that their savings were gone. The streets of Pasto, Tumaco, and Popayan will burn. Towns in Putumayo will threaten to secede from Colombia. The president will declare a state of economic emergency and put soldiers on the streets. The company had collected, according to prosecutors, roughly $2 billion. Some estimates place it as high as $4 billion. There is one small problem with the money. Most of it cannot be found. But 5 years earlier, nobody had heard of David Murcia Guzmán, the man the press would later call the Colombian Madoff. He was a former camera operator in a town the banks had forgotten, with an idea about money. To understand what he built, you have to understand where he built it. La Hormiga sits in Putumayo, in Colombia's far south, a region so remote and so entangled with the country's cocaine economy that the formal banking system had all but written it off. No branches worth mentioning. No credit for ordinary people. If you lived there and needed money, the banks were not an option. Because for you, the banks did not exist. David Murcia Guzmán had no financial training. He had worked with cameras. But he understood something the banks had missed. An entire population that felt robbed of access to money and would be loyal to anyone who finally offered it. So here is what DMG did. You walked into a DMG office and handed over cash. In return, you received a prepaid card. Credit to spend on goods and services at DMG's own shops and partners. And you received points. Those points, over the following months, translated into a profit of somewhere between 75 and 150%, in under a year. Let that sit. You give the company $1,000. Within the year, you have something like $2,000. Now, a return like that has a name, and the name is interest. And a company that collects the public's cash and pays it interest has another name. It is a bank. Banks in Colombia answer to the financial superintendents, the regulator whose entire job is to check that the money is really there. DMG's answer to this was a single, elegant piece of language. The payouts DMG said were not interest. They were payments for advertising. When you shopped at DMG, you became a walking billboard for DMG, and the company was simply paying you for the publicity. On paper, that made DMG not a bank, but an ordinary commercial company. And commercial companies did not answer to the banking watchdog. They answered to the superintendents of societies, the corporate registry, which watches whether your paperwork is filed, not whether your money is real. Rename the interest, and you change regulators. That was the trick. The whole scheme legally rested on one word. And here is the part that made it dangerous rather than merely clever. Murcia sold that dodge as a virtue. He cast himself as a Robin Hood, a man democratizing wealth against a banking oligarchy that had shut the poor out for generations. His freedom from the regulators wasn't a warning sign, he said. It was proof he was on your side. His followers came to call themselves the DMG family. From La Hormiga it spread. DMG Grupo Holding was incorporated in 2005 with a modest 100 million pesos. In a very short time, prosecutors found it was capitalized with more than 20 times that. Money the sentencing court would later rule Murcia had no lawful capacity to have earned. Branches opened in Panama, Venezuela, and Ecuador. More than 200 companies were registered in Panama alone. There were plans for Brazil, Peru, and Mexico. DMG even bought its own television channel. A man with a camera, a jungle town, and one clever word had built something that looked from the outside like an empire. The outside was the only place it looked like one. So let's do the thing we do on this channel. Let's rewind to before the collapse, when this all still looked like a miracle, and ask the only question that matters. Would you have caught it? Red flag 1. The impossible return wearing a costume. 75 to 150% in under a year relabeled as advertising. But renaming a number does not change the arithmetic underneath it. A real business generates a return from selling something at a profit. If the return can't come from the business, there's only one other place it can come from. The next depositor's cash. Calling it advertising doesn't answer the question. It just changes the subject. Red flag 2. A company advertising its own lack of oversight. DMG didn't hide that it operated outside the banking regulator. It bragged about it. It sold that freedom as anti-elite virtue. But turn that around. When a company that holds your money celebrates the fact that no watchdog is checking whether the money is there, that isn't a political stance. That's the business model, announcing itself out loud. Red flag 3. Cash with soil on it. In August 2007, a full year before the collapse, Colombian authorities seized bulk DMG-linked cash in Putumayo. Some of it was damp, traced with dirt, consistent with having been buried. This was reported at the time, but people, deposits, and returns kept flowing. The market shrugged. Red flag 4. Owners who couldn't afford what they owned. Yachts, aircraft, and properties tied to the operation were registered to third parties who the sentencing court found had no economic capacity to own such things. When the real owner of an asset hides behind someone who plainly can't be the owner, the question isn't why. The question is what is being hidden. And red flag 5, the deepest one and the hardest to act on. When the government finally moved, the depositors didn't turn on Murcia. They rioted to protect him. Blindly. They filled El Campín Stadium in Bogotá. They went on hunger strikes. Here's our point, and you will not find it in the coverage from the time. The strength of a scheme's defenders is not evidence that the scheme is real. A legitimate bank's customers never riot for the bank. That loyalty inversion, victims acting as the fraud's bodyguards, is the hardest flag of all to heed. Because to heed it, you have to admit that you've been deceived upon and that your savings are already gone. 5 flags. Some were in the newspapers a year ahead of time. Which of them would have stopped you from handing over the cash? If any, tell me in the comments. Here is what's strange about the collapse. It wasn't the regulators who ended DMG. It wasn't an auditor. For years, an interagency task force, tax authority, prosecutors, intelligence, police, had circled the company and come away with little more than minor accounting infractions. The machine kept running. What ended it was another scheme entirely. In late 2008, in southwest Colombia, a copycat operation collapsed. It was called DRFE, Dinero Rápido, Fácil y Efectivo. Fast, easy, effective money. When DRFE went down, ordinary people got scared, and scared people do the one thing a pyramid cannot survive. They asked for their money back, all at once. The panic spread. On November 12th, riots broke out across the South. The government declared a state of economic emergency, and then it issued a decree in 2008 to intervene DMG directly, freezing the company and putting it under state control. Now the machine had to prove the money was there. It could not. Murcia was already moving. He was captured in Panama in November 2008 and deported to Bogotá within days. The Fiscalia charged him with illegal mass collection of money and aggravated money laundering. As he was flown home, his supporters massed at El Campín Stadium, towns in Putumayo, Mocoa, Puerto Asís, Orito, La Hormiga, called for the region to break away from Colombia. The people around him were pulled in one by one. In January 2009, his wife was detained in Uruguay. Days later, a close aide was captured. Investigators hoped he could lead them to the caletas, the hidden stashes where the cash was believed to be buried. Because that was the other problem. $2 billion at least had come in. Where had it gone? Some of it, prosecutors said, had gone into the ground. And this is where the darker allegation enters. And here I have to be precise. Reporting and prosecutors have described DMG as having a second nature underneath the shops, a laundering machine for drug traffickers holding bulk cash. That earlier soil trace seizure was, at first, suspected to be guerrilla money. Investigators had intercepted DMG-related calls after detecting mass movements of money. But I want to be exact about what a court actually decided. Murcia was convicted of money laundering, not of a specific proven narco-trafficking conspiracy. The drug money narrative is what prosecutors and the press have alleged, and Murcia himself has always denied it. He calls the whole case government persecution, insists the returns were simply advances on purchases, and as recently as 2025, in a letter to Colombia's president, he flatly denied laundering for guerrillas, traffickers, or paramilitaries. The court took a different view of the laundering. In December 2009, a Bogotá court sentenced him to more than 30 years. The empire built on one clever word had lasted about 5 years. Unwinding it would take far, far longer. David Murcia Guzmán was sentenced in Colombia to 30 years and 8 months for aggravated money laundering and illegal mass collection of money, later reduced on appeal to just under 23 years. He was barred from public office for 20 years and hit with heavy fines. Then he was extradited to the United States. In 2011, a federal court in New York sentenced him to roughly 9 years for money laundering conspiracy, a charge he accepted. After completing his American sentence, he was returned to a Colombian cell where he remains today in La Picota prison in Bogotá. That is what happened to the man. Here is what happened to everyone else. By some estimates, up to 500,000 people had money inside DMG, and they were not alone in their instincts. At the height of Colombia's 2008 pyramid crisis, an estimated 4 million Colombians, soldiers, professionals, the very poor, had money in one scheme or another. DMG was the largest. The liquidation is still not finished. More than 15 years on, the balances on those prepaid cards have not been returned. We don't have to take our word for that. In his own 2025 letter begging for release, Murcia himself notes that the victim's card balances remain unpaid. 17 years later. So account for it. The money went into coletas, into seized yachts and aircraft, and into legal fees. The case became a telenovela. Murcia, in prison, has reinvented himself as a spiritual leader, preaching a new family DMG, while supporters gather signatures for his release. And the depositors, the 500,000 who filled the stadium, who rioted to defend him, who believed he was democratizing wealth, they got the points. They got a foundation. They got a t-shirt. To rename interest as advertising is a clever move. You can't deny it. But this did not create wealth, and it was only for changing who the regulator would be, delaying the day the money had to be counted and shown. When that day came, the shops were real, the products were real, the riots were real. But guess, the 2 billion were not. The auditor has spoken, and this has been Sin Fondos. The funds were never there. If you'd like the next one, subscribe.